Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Okay, guys, I am really excited today because I have a fellow Brit on the podcast. Whoop, whoop. I feel like we should be doing like prayer hand emojis or whatever the kind of thing is. But today I'm joined by the amazing Hannah Martin from Talented Ladies Club. And there are two reasons I'm really excited about this. One, obviously, because British and it's nice to have a similar accent on the podcast with me. That's always a joy. But also because you are somebody who's built up this incredible business here in the UK, this specializing in helping women, but you actually have a proven background in what you're teaching. And that's really refreshing for me. So you came from this amazing background of freelance copywriting for some epic brands. I'm particularly impressed by Guinness, by the way. I'm obsessed with Guinness. So I'm hoping we can weave that into the conversation later. But welcome to the podcast. It's amazing to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
No, welcome. So tell us about the Talented Ladies Club and tell us about like you and what you do on the daily.
Okay, so I set TLC up nearly 6 years ago now. So I am a mum and I wanted to do something that fitted around my children, but I really wanted to do something that I was passionate about. So I come from a really creative background. I worked in advertising for years. I had a job that I loved. My goal was always to have a job I loved so much I would do for free, but I got paid for it.
Yeah.
And that was the career that I had. When I had my daughter, so she's nearly 10, when I fell pregnant with her, I didn't want to do the same thing I did with my son, who's 16 now, and I go back to work full time and never see my child. So I decided to work from home. And I was able to build a really successful freelance career, but it wasn't as creative. It wasn't at the cutting edge that I'd been before. So while I was bringing in money, I lost some of my passion and drive. And I wanted to do something that fired me up again, I was passionate about, that was really creative. I also saw so many friends I was meeting in my hometown who'd had children and completely lost their careers and hadn't found a way like me to make it work on some level. So I think combining those two things, I really wanted to have something positive and inspiring and empowering for women. And I also wanted to do something I really loved. So that's how it was born, really. And today, so 6 years on, I still run it myself. I have got an office in my town, about 5 minutes walk from home. I have some people who work for me. I have lots of freelancers who work kind of regularly for me. But other than that, I still run it around my children. I'm not going to kind of pretend I only work 4 hours a day on it. As you probably know, it is very much a full-time business. But the great thing is that I can work evenings and weekends if I want, and because I love what I do, it never feels like work. So I do work a lot of hours, but I get to choose when those hours are.
See, now I love this because it's one of those things, and we were just talking about on the pre-chat, and you guys, to be a fly on the wall during the pre-chat, we're going to get into it in the episode, but we were just talking on the pre-chat about the way that businesses are run now and the way that we see them in the online space, where people are projecting, oh my goodness, I'm only working 2 hours a day, but here I am making my millions, and it's also effortless and easy. And whilst business can be easy, right, while we can systematize things and we can structure things, I think that there's become this kind of dangerous almost trend of people who are getting comparisonitis, looking at people posting all day, oh, my business, I'm not really working on it. And actually behind the scenes, they're like doing everything. They're doing their own social media, they're writing all their copy, they're doing all their content, they're delivering to all their clients, they're selling all of the time proactively, but they're portraying this completely different image.
You see it a lot, and it really irritates me because running a business is hard. The buck stops at you. And you do, especially when you start out, you don't have, unless someone comes along and says, here's £1 million, go and create a business. You don't have that budget. And you have to do everything yourself. And actually, I think in the beginning, it's actually quite good because TLC is a very lean business. It has been bootstrapped from the ground up. So in the early years, I did absolutely everything myself. But it meant that I made small mistakes really early on that I learnt from. And I didn't have a huge repercussion. I have seen businesses that have had investment really early on, and then they have quite a bloated business model. Like, They don't know how to properly monetize what they do because they've had this sort of buffer of that finance. But the reality is, starting a business it's hard work. It takes quite a long time to iron out all the things that you have to do to get it to work. And I think to misrepresent it, that literally I'm on the beach and I'm drinking a cocktail. Actually, when I go to the beach and drink a cocktail, I don't want to work. That's my holiday. But yeah, it's called apparently attraction marketing. Is the name for it. I prefer to call it envy marketing, because what they are actually trying to get you to do is to envy what they have, to make you believe that, a bit like all the celebs do in Hello magazine, everything's perfect. Don't you want to be like me? And we know about the curse of Hello. So I'm very cynical when I see marketing like that. Let's just put it that way.
So I love that you've brought up the Hello magazine, because we are recording this just after the National Television Awards weekend here in the UK. And so one of the things that I looked at when I binge on celebrity gossip, I must admit, I'm one of those people that if I'm scrolling through Google and I'm looking at the predefined hints that it gives me, it's always like, this celebrity did this. And I'm like, oh, what did they do? And I have to look. And so I was scrolling through on, I don't know, Tuesday morning or something. And there were two of the people from Love Island. And they'd, it's huge here over the summer last year. And they'd gone to the NTAs and they'd been on the red carpet. They looked lovely. And then at about 2 a.m, when they were absolutely bladdered, they'd had a fight with somebody from another reality TV show, and glasses were thrown at each other, and like, there was a big row, and people on Instagram taking sides. And that is sometimes how the online space feels, because it's, you call it envy marketing, sorry, or, it's known as attraction market. I call it the soup. I'm like, oh, there are lots of people in the soup, because the reality is that if you're on holiday, like you say, when I'm sat on a beach drinking cocktails and sunbathing, I'm not taking my laptop. Like, there is no way, because let's face it, sand in the keyboard, not a good look. Like, I don't know who can do this. It just doesn't work. No. But also, it doesn't teach my clients the best boundaries, which is ultimately, nobody creates a business to have another 9 to 5 where you take your BlackBerry on holiday and you check your emails and you feel like you're indispensable from the company. If you build that kind of business, you grow to resent it. And that's what we're seeing, is this rise of people who are like, oh my goodness, I'm posting this on social media, I'm not working. But you are
absolutely. One of the things, like when I work with people, I get them to keep my tabs. I've got a pinned tab, which is a Google spreadsheet, and I put every hour I work on my business, I log where I spend it on my business, so I can see where my time is actually spent. As you're saying, randomly checking your phone, like when you're in the school run, you're working. It does count.
Yeah, it all counts. And I think we have to be quite realistic about what it takes building business. I mean, you've just said 6 years it's taken you to build TLC to what it is now. It's, my 5th year in business this year. It's not a short amount of time. Like, we've put in the reps. It's been a considerable amount of work. Both of us have grown businesses that have been incredibly lean on the cost front, and then obviously have had really solid success. But I think sometimes it can be hard. When you're in your first year of business, I don't know about you, but first year of business, I didn't really know. I'd worked in corporate businesses for years, but I'd never been responsible for everything, and suddenly I was HR and finance and legal, and that wasn't even to mention the stuff I was actually supposed to be doing, like delivering to my clients and selling. And that's hard. It really is hard. And it doesn't get easier probably until year 2 or 3, when you've kind of figured it out a bit, you can outsource some stuff. So, I mean, I think we have to be really realistic with people about, if you're in your first year and it feels hard, it's because it is.
And that's the danger of the soup, as you're calling it, this message. Because if you are someone at home on your own and you don't have, especially if you're a mom and you don't know lots of people, and you're trying to build a business without any experience, and you're struggling, because I said that first year's tough, really tough, and you have to put a lot out there with no guarantee anything's going to come back. And you see someone else going, oh, well, it's easy. I was making like 50 grand a day by my second month. And, and I only work 2 hours a week. And you're thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Maybe I'm a failure because it's not that way for me. And that's why I think this podcast is great. And I think the message should be far more honest, because it will make people feel less alone.
And that's the thing, one of the things that I always find, particularly about the area that I'm in. So when we talk about sales, it's very easy for people to feel isolated. because so much of what we see is based on revenue instead of being based on net profit. And that's, I think, the danger, of any space really. But I mean, brick and mortar companies don't get away with it quite so much, because a brick and mortar can't necessarily go out there and be like, right, who am I going to publish this wealth to? Like, it's not the kind of social media furor that we have. But I see a lot of people talking about, I feel alone, or I feel like I'm failing because I'm not having the 25 grand days in month one. And then we look at the reality. I mean, if we start unpicking what the reality of a business looks like, well, how much did it cost them to generate that 25K in the first place? What were the expenses that went into that? Were there paid advertising costs or team costs or time costs? Because everything has an expense number. It's just that we're not always seeing that publicly.
Absolutely. And there are several things there. It's like, you don't actually know if that's true to start with.
Yeah.
How many decimal points are you including in that 6 figures? And like you say, we don't know the truth. They may have had investment. They may have known someone very influential. There were lots of reasons why they might have achieved that. And also, is that a sustainable business? Is that person going to be earning 25 grand a day in a year's time? There were all those things. And I think when we get into that, and I always liken it to running a race. If you are on that track as a sprinter, all you've got to focus on is your finishing line in your lane. And if you focus on that, you will put all your energy into going into that direction. The moment you are looking at what the person in the next lane is doing, or looking at the person behind you, it's when you slow down, you stumble, or you veer off track. And I have to say, and you probably will find this as well, after 5 years, 6 years in business, I've seen a lot of hares who passed me stumble. Some of them have closed down completely. Some of them are really struggling. Whereas I've always taken a very slow approach to how I've grown the business and made sure it's been the right decision. And, month on month, we're growing bigger and stronger and more profitable. And that has been a very slow path. And there have been times in the past, it took quite a long time to make money in Tap Ladies Club. And there were quite a few times when I thought, well, am I doing it wrong? I've been going all these years and everyone else seems to be so much more successful, but I just kept plugging away day after day after day. And I got things right and I made lots of mistakes, but then I learned to correct them. So I feel like our growth is solid, and I feel like the tortoise, and I think there is something to be said for not rushing too fast. And some of the people that you might be envying might not be around in a year's time. You don't know. They might be, but they might not be. And you don't know what their story is. Their business is their business, literally.
I love that. And I think that's so important, because it's one of the things that I said at a speaking event that I was speaking at recently was, take a look around the room, because 98% of small businesses fail within the first 2 years. So it's quite likely when you look around that some of those faces are not going to be here next year or the year after. And that is the interesting thing, because we don't see what goes on necessarily behind the doors of some of these businesses. They might have, like you say, the 125K day, but then not make money for 6 months. So it doesn't necessarily all even out in quite the same sort of style. And I think that, this idea of comparing your business to somebody else's, like you say, you have to stay in your own lane, because if you don't, all you're ever going to do is build a business based on what you see other people doing and thinking that it's working. And it might not be. One of the trends recently has been everybody's doing the same Facebook ads. I don't know what's going on, but it's like apparently now pictures of cats are the big thing. And as I keep on my newsfeed, all I see is like this weird cat. And I'm like, I don't know who started that trend. And I don't care. But the fact is, putting your money into an ad kind of style that somebody else has done once doesn't necessarily mean you're testing something that has been successful for that person. They could be testing it. They have probably a lot more money to put into it and can tweak it and do lots of split tests and different things with the back end of that funnel. So if you're just copying one piece, it's not going to work. And that's why you've just got to stay in your specific lane and think about what you want to do and achieve.
And I think also, there's a lot of talk about money, and money is important because obviously you're in a business, has to be profitable. But if you think about the reasons why you go into business, it's not just about money at any cost. Money, actually, when you talk to business people and you talk about what are the things you get from your business, money is rarely in the top three. Mm-hmm. They think doing something I love, using my passions, building a lifestyle that I enjoy, feeling good, being satisfied, helping people. There are lots of reasons why we start businesses. And obviously, there has to be money in there, and it has to be profitable, but purely focusing on just the headline being money, I think kind of also kind of can make us forget or lose touch with the reasons why we started our business and fall out of love with it. Yeah. And I think if we stick to actually, what are my goals? And yes, someone else may be phenomenally financially successful. They may have stumbled across something or worked really hard. And actually some of the overnight successes have a long legacy of stuff that means that they were able to achieve that seemingly overnight, but it rarely ever is. And if someone has done well, fantastic, that's great for them. But you've got to think about is, why did I start my business? What are my smart business goals? How am I going to achieve them? And focus on those. And it may be that you set different financial goals for yourself. And if you achieve them, brilliant. You know, for some people, if you have like £1,000 day, that's fantastic. That's something to celebrate. Don't let your success be diminished because suddenly it's in the shadow of this giant figure that someone else has earned when you have no idea the reality behind how they achieved that.
And this is the thing, because I think sometimes we have to talk about wealth. So Denise Duffield Thomas says, wealthy women will change the world. I always change that slightly because in the interest of equality, I feel like it should be wealthy people. Like it's one of those things that is a bugbear. So wealthy people can change the world, but your own definition of wealth has to factor into that. Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. And for some people, when you work out your number, and it's really interesting because one of my Dottie's members was saying this the other day, she's like, I kind of feel like I want a 5K a month business. And I was like, that's great. What's wrong with that? She's like, well, other people, they want all this stuff. And I'm like, but that doesn't matter, because if what's right for you is 5K a month or 2K a month or 10K or 50K or 100, like whatever that number is, it doesn't matter. It's about defining your own wealth and what it will take for you to change the world that you live in and that you want to do well with. If you want to go out and campaign for, I don't know, changes to the climate, or if you want to go out and get into politics or particularly support somebody in one particular party, wealthy people do have a lot more advantages. But I think sometimes we're only seeing wealth as being the really big numbers and the really big wins, instead of looking at, well, how much do you really need to live? I mean, when I started my business, my goal, I wanted to make £1,500 a month. I was like, I can pay my mortgage and I can eat, and that's wonderful. And I was like, that's great. And when we surpassed it, I was pleased. But I was, I was saying to my CIO the other day, well, my personal expenses are not that high because I'm still the same kind of person. I still live in the same place. So my mortgage hasn't changed. If anything, it's got lower because we've been paying chunks off at a time. I go to the supermarket down the road and it's a Lidl. And everyone's like, oh, you shop a Lidl. I'm like, I do Tesco home delivery the majority of the time because they come to the door. Like, it's so easy. But the rest of the time, yes, I go to Lidl. It's like £2 for a chicken. Why would I not? And I think we have to start redefining this need to have a luxury lifestyle, because like you say, this envy marketing cannot last forever, because soon we'll all be on first class flights doing whatever.
Well, exactly. And society, the economic society can't sustain everybody being a millionaire. But also, I know lots of very unhappy rich people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is, when I think about that, the things that make me happy are my friends. Going to dinner with my friends and hanging out with them. I love travel, but I've got kids at the moment, so that's on hold until they've left home. But I like kind of nice food and nice wine, but I shop at my local supermarket as well. I actually have very, very simple needs. Like my car I've got a nice car, but it's 10 years old. I'm delighted with my car. I'll probably keep another 10 years. That's not a priority to me. So when you see photos of someone getting into like a Maserati, it's like, well, I'm glad you're happy. That's not my motivation. So like you say, there's only a certain amount of money that any of us actually need to earn anyway. And I think what we all seek is actually contentment. We think we seek happiness, but happiness is actually a high. What we actually want is contentment.
Yeah.
And contentment comes from knowing the things that make you happy and having them. And that's it. And money itself, money is an enabler of other things. Money itself doesn't make you happy.
I love that, because money is neutral, and I think we attach so much to it, and I'm a sales coach. Like, of course, the people who come to me, they all want to make more money. And I completely agree with that, because money does enable you to do good things in the world for yourself, for other people. but money itself doesn't cause anything, you know. And I think it's one of the struggles we have around pricing, because people do find, oh my goodness, if I charge really high prices, am I, and we were talking about this pre-recording, am I one of those business owners, coaches, consultants who charges a really high price but doesn't get my client a return? And so we've seen the industry kind of shift over the last few years, because it used to be really popular to charge high prices, and you're like, right, high ticket, high transformation, let's go. And suddenly that's migrated where people have been burnt. They're like, no, if I charge a high price, I'm going to become that kind of business owner. And that's not necessarily going to happen. You know, if you charge high ticket and you get a high transformation for your client, wonderful, like charge away. But don't be nervous and don't price based on what you think other people's perceptions of you will be for having that price tag.
I think I always recommend you price for the value that you offer. And as long as you have appropriate price for what you do, then that's absolutely fine. If you, like you say, if you're able to transform someone's business. So I've had coaching, my husband, an absolute fortune. The first business coach I had for TLC, so TLC at that time was bringing in about £500 a month, and she was nearly £1,000 a month. Luckily, I'm always quite conservative with money, so TLC had savings. So for 6 months, first 6 months I worked with her, she put me in the red month on month, because I always do a month on month kind of end of month kind of accounts. But after that 6 months, we went into the black and we carried on going up. And when I look at how much I paid her during our coaching time together versus how much she changed my profits, the return on investment was high.
Yeah.
So there are cases whereby actually investing a lot of money in the right person, and I was really careful about who I chose. I looked around for a long time for someone who wasn't all kind of bluff, and that actually behind the kind of big sales pitch there was actually substance there. What I do, we both talked about people who've been burned by people who haven't had substance behind that. And in those cases, sadly, people have invested a lot of hope and a lot of money and not had a return. But I think, in my case with my coach, she was worth that money because I got that return on that investment.
And also that's a lot about who you are as a person, because I think there's a big difference between investment and expenses, and I assume that you do too, based on that. For me, an investment is something that I'm going to get a return from. So if I invest in a coach, yes, I might take a hit financially. I made a few or two substantial coaching investments this year into mentors that, I want to work with for specific reasons to help take my business in new directions. The return on investment that I get from both will be completely different. One will not be financial at all. One will not be financial. It will all be about network and connection and building different relationships. And the other one will be financial. But it doesn't mean I look at them, I look at one as more of an investment and one as more of an expense, because I'm going to get something back from both of them. Whereas an expense in my business is something that I have to pay. I don't necessarily see anything back from.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Oh, the Wi-Fi, the love of Wi-Fi. But it is that kind of thing, isn't it? I think, it's one of those things that as your business grows, you do start to see more expenses, and that's a natural shift for people. I mean, you must have gone through this with TLC, where as you start to grow, your expenses, it becomes scary because you replace your monthly income and suddenly you're paying that out and you're thinking, whoa, hang on, how does this feel? How does this work?
And especially when you take on, I now have salaries to pay in effect every month. I have people who they may be freelancers, but I've committed to give them a certain amount of work. And I know, yes, I could stop tomorrow and say, oh, actually there's no more work, but ethically I can't do that because they're basing their family finances on that income coming in. Then you have that pressure. But it took over 5 years for me to actually bring in someone to do marketing, for example. By the time I took her on, I knew that there was enough money coming in the business to support her wage on top of everything else. And I knew how long it would take for that return on investment to happen. So there have to be really, really considered expenses. I think if you're going to invest in things, you really have to think about, how is that going to impact my business? How long before I see a return? And is it weighed up? Is that an expense? There are some things, as you say, where actually the return on investment isn't going to be financial, but the value in the business is still high, even though it's not monetary.
And that's the thing. I mean, let's talk about sales here for a second, because I think one of the things that is always touted, and that, I say this, I'm like, look, it's always easier to make more money. it just is, right? It doesn't mean your expenses should be huge. And in fact, you know, if you can keep your expenses lean, like my business, we operated at 49% profit last year. We were really pleased with that. You know, we made some major investments into software and things that will pay off this year, but that last year we didn't really see a lot from, because it wasn't up and running yet. And so in that case, it was easier to just make more money. However, your business can't live like that forever, as my accountant it tells me. And he's like, right, we have to look at these numbers and get it back up into the 50s this year. And I'm like, yeah, cool, chill. So how did TLC, when you started selling, how did you find that your sales pattern grew? You know, was it something that, you know, like you say, grew steadily, but you were taking expenses out early, or were you stockpiling? Like, how did that growth pattern go with the sales?
So in terms of investment, I always believe in investing in growth. So, you know, if I needed software, I'd go and buy it. I would think carefully about which I chose. In terms of sales, we made every mistake going. I mean, sales were a really slow burn for us. And actually, that's the thing that coaching most helped with, was looking at pricing in particular, because I made that classic mistake. I did a pricing masterclass yesterday. So we taught this theory throughout it. Just because you price something cheap doesn't mean to say that you're going to get more business. You're not going to have nicer customers or happier customers. You're not going to have more grateful customers. You're not going to feel better at what you sell either, because sometimes we think, oh, I'm not really sure I'm good enough, so I'm going to make it really, really cheap and then I feel okay about selling it. No. You have to take pricing out of it. You have to feel good about what you're selling as a kind of foundation, and everything comes on from that. Above that, you have to price the value you offer. Pricing too cheaply, as I did in the start, I thought, oh, let's be the cheapest of everything on the market. And then everyone's going to buy from us. We'll be rich because we're, you know, and it didn't work like that, because people are thinking, oh, why is that so cheap? It can't be any good.
Imagining like Hannah in year one, like really like, oh my goodness, yay, full of the joys of spring. Everyone's going to buy it, and like putting it out onto the internet and then be like, what the hell is wrong with you people? Like,
I know.
It's so cheap.
Yeah, I've had so many kind of, you know, you're launching a new product and you hear about people kind of going, oh yeah, my phone was just pinging with all the sales coming in. And you know, and now I've got to, you know, I do know how to do that now. But this many years on, and many launches I did where, you know, the phone pinged but twice, you know. But, you know, I learned the hard way. And I'm really, really glad, because I think it enables me to teach other people. It enables me to understand the struggles that other people have. I think if I'd had it really easy, I wouldn't necessarily be able to teach anyone else to start with. I was going, well, you just sell. And I also really appreciate the success we do have now. I know how hard one it is. And I know none of it feels like a fluke. I don't know if I feel like an imposter, because I know how hard I have worked to get it. But yeah, absolutely. In terms of pricing and sales, you have to get it right. And please, whatever you do, I know we've talked a lot about people overcharging, but you shouldn't undercharge either, because you're not going to have a business undercharging. You have to work out what your proper, and you know, you talked about profit margin. And one of the things I teach people is transactional pricing. Work out how much it actually costs you to produce an hour of your time or one of your product. And you have to also factor in your time. A lot of people they think their time is free. So when they work out how to price something, they just look at, well, it costs me that in materials, that in postage, that's my price. And they haven't factored in, you know, their share of the Wi-Fi, you know, like all the bank charges, the tax. And they haven't factored in how much time it's taken them to market that, or to email a customer if they've got a problem. And it's very easy to actually think you're making a profit and find out you're making it a loss, because you haven't worked out your pricing properly. And it's so important to understand exactly how much it costs you to run your business.
100%. And also how much it costs you to acquire a customer in the first place. You know, I think that's one of the big sales mistakes that I see most often is we'll say to people, well, how much does it cost you to acquire a customer? And they're like, well, nothing, but I spent 10 hours in a Facebook group and 3 hours on Twitter and 4 hours on LinkedIn. I'm like, right, okay, so if your price per hour is £100, you just spent like $5,000 getting a customer. And they're like, oh, right. And so we do have to look at that when it comes to sales. You know, profit is the biggest thing. You know, revenue is the sexy bit, I guess, that everyone's kind of concerned about. But profit, really, what you're taking home, what you're being able to give to your family, which is ultimately why most people are starting businesses, that's really where it's at. And I think we can't continue to ignore that.
No, and I know people. So I know a friend of my husband's who built a business up from like a one-man band, working from home. He now has a huge workshop. He's got a massive workforce of people working for him. He brings home less today than he did when he worked from home by himself. And he's incredibly stressed. And he's fallen into this trap whereby he's grown this large business, but he actually doesn't bring very much home. Absolutely. And just in terms of the confidence about selling, and I know women particularly have a real issue with pricing themselves and going out and asking for that. If you do those sums, when you actually know how much it costs you to create or produce or deliver or to market something, it makes it much easier to put a price on it and sell it. You feel better about pricing it when you know, well, hold on a second, let's say you make beautiful hand-painted mugs and you think, well, I feel really bad because people could buy a mug in TK Maxx for £5 and I'm selling mine for 10. When you work out it costs you £18 to make that mug and you realise you're selling it for 10, but actually you think, well, actually can go out and charge up for £25. I will find a market of people who want beautiful mugs because I know that it's cost me £18. So why am I selling it for 10? And suddenly, because I think when we don't do our sums, we kind of feel we're taking a punt with pricing. We kind of feel like we're going, oh, I don't know, a tenner.
100%.
And when you know your pricing, you know your business inside out, you do not have, there's no qualm about going and asking for it because it's cost you that. So why would you sell it for less than that?
100%. And I think, so this is really interesting for me because I think I'm somebody who I can be quite snarky about people with their, massive fees. And it's one of those things like I have charged high ticket in my business. I continue to charge high ticket for certain things. And I'm absolutely fine about that. I have no problem with high ticket pricing, as long as the value is delivered, as long as the transformation is gotten, etc., etc. But there are so many people out there who don't take the time to think about what their prices are and who just magic a number up on the spot, right? And I came in and did a masterclass for your lovely TLC ladies. And we talked about on the discovery calls, like structuring and knowing your prices and not just going in there and being like, oh, well, I could do this. And it will be before you know how much that's going to cost you, whether it's service-based or product-based. Ultimately, what you don't want to do is turn around at the end of the year and think, oh, I took a bunch of money and that's great. Now I have to pay the tax man and I didn't factor that in. And suddenly it turns out that my profit is £1 or £2 because actually my expenses were out of control and this happened and that happened. And you never want it to be a surprise. Whereas if you plan ahead and you're on those calls, you can talk about the situation, you can manage those budgets better, you can talk about the right solution for the right problem and price accordingly, rather than just being like, right, I'm just going to pick a number out of my head because today I feel good or today I don't feel so good.
Yeah, all that kind of, then we end up in that limbo where we're like, well, what's so-and-so price charging? Oh, I've heard if you end in a 7, it magically makes sense. But you end up kind of, oh, if I put a rabbit on my sales page for luck, I'll get more sales. You end up kind of having almost lottery ticket kind of hoping for the best rather than actually pricing because you know what it should be. Obviously, you look at the market rate, you look at where you sit in the market, but you also need to know what your pricing is. And it doesn't really matter what your neighbour charges. It matters what the market rate is, where you sit in that market, who your target audience are, and how much it costs you to deliver that.
And so I love this because I was listening to an episode of Ali Brown's podcast, Glambition Radio, a couple of weeks ago. I'm working my way through a backlog. I haven't listened to podcasts properly since, before December because I took a month off for Christmas to eat my body weight of food in Copenhagen and, not work. And so I was listening to this episode and it was with her and Kendall Summerhawk, who is somebody I really admire. She's also in the sales industry. And they were talking about VIP days. And I love hosting VIP days. I think it's a great way to work intensively with clients. It's also a really nice high ticket, high transformation offer for people who are just starting out. Like there are so many plus sides to it. And they were talking about pricing. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, somebody is here giving clear market rate pricing. And they literally said, if you are making in your business less than 6 figures, your pricing for a VIP day should not be more than £3,000. And it shouldn't be less than 1,000. Because if it's less than 1,000, the time that goes into creating it, the fact that you're probably going to have to host it at a different location and pay for that cost, lunch expenses, etc., you're not going to make any money. But equally, especially if you're selling business services, more than 3,000 is too much because that person is not going to get an adequate return based on your experience. And they went through and they were like, if you're already making six figures, then you could go up to this. And if you're making multi six figures, you go up to that. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it, because actually, sometimes we feel like we're paying for a name. But when you know that everybody in the industry at the top, if you like, is doing the same thing and is looking at the market and saying, okay, well, what are people's experience at this level, this level, this level, and charging based on what you feel you can add. If they're then charging 15,000 for a VIP day, well, that's great, because I'm going to double or triple that investment from that strategy that's coming. And that, I think, is what we have to start looking at is, yes, how much is it going to cost you to provide and do, but also what is somebody going to walk away with? What's their return on investment, and how much is that worth to them?
Absolutely. And I think that is so important. And one of the things, I launched a 6-month program last summer, and I did interviews with everybody who came on the program, because I wanted to make sure if they were coming on the program, I believed I could transform their business to a greater sum than the amount they're investing. Otherwise, it's not going to feel good for anybody. You won't feel good about working with someone who the potential isn't there in their business as it stands. They're not going to feel good about it. It's just not going to work. So yeah, there has to absolutely be. And if someone is charging £15,000 a day, but they're working with people with the potential to earn more than that back, and they are able to, then that is a wise investment. It is a good return on investment. But it all comes down to that, what the potential is for that sum of money.
And being ready to use the investment. You touched upon earlier your first business coach and the fact that you went into the red to work with her, but after the work was complete, the profit margins went up. I think one of the things that sometimes we can see in the online space is that people want to work with the person at the top. And so they're like, right, I'm going to pay out the tons of money right at the beginning. But that person isn't necessarily the best person equipped to help you with your first lead magnet, with creating your first sales page, with writing your copy. Because even though they are one of the best in their industry, they're now renowned for working with people at a higher level who are going to be virtually guaranteed to make that money back and then some, because they will already have other elements to their business that mean that becomes viable. They've got a bigger audience, they are already working well with their sales strategies, and they need different help and systemization and that kind of thing. So I think we always have to look at, where are we ready to invest, at what level, and be really sensible with your investments. Look around and look at, what do I actually need to focus on right now? What's going to get me the best results? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it mindset? Or is it something completely different that isn't as sexy, right?
Absolutely. And I think actually there's something to be said for really sticking your neck out. And when you've got, they call it skin in the game. I think, with the coach I worked with at that time, I was basically spending money that I didn't have, that, I wasn't making every month. So I really was engaged with that. Mm-hmm. And I took responsibility for making sure that I got that return on investment. And I think that sometimes there is something to be said for kind of pushing yourself that little bit. Obviously, you need to make sure that actually the potential is there for the return yourself, that you can actually afford it, that, you're not going to commit something and get a credit card, but that actually making yourself a little bit uncomfortable is sometimes when the greatest growth comes. Because when we stay comfortable, we don't really want to kind of push ourselves too far, because we go outside that comfort zone. But if you force yourself out of it, for example, by making a significant investment, you personally take that responsibility and you will engage with it far more than maybe someone else who that comes, if I find £4,000 in my back pocket, whatever, I'll do a bit of coaching. I'm ambivalent about it. Versus someone who's like, well, okay, this is the only £4,000 I've got, and if this doesn't work, I'm going to starve. But that person is going to give much more to the process, and they probably will get more out of it.
I love that. Thank you so much. Seriously, I could talk to you for hours. It's so nice, and it's really refreshing to talk to people who have integrity around how they run their business and who look out for their clients. I think this is something that 2019 is going to be a year that is economically challenging across the globe. And I think everybody is going to become much more savvy about where they spend their money. And it's not going to necessarily, I don't think it means that we all have to start reducing our prices. I have never thought that. Maybe that's the benefit of working through a bunch of different recessions. I don't know. Like, you just don't get get scared by them anymore.
You've weathered the storms before.
Well, that's it. I think people are going to be much more savvy, and they're not necessarily going to want to put things on 12-part payment plans. And they're not going to be like, oh, it's fine, I can just put it on the credit card and like all good. And if it doesn't work out, whatever, if I don't use it, oh, never mind. I think it's going to be very much people are going to do their research. They're going to be targeting specific needs, specific problems that they have to solve, and looking for the people that can best help them. And the price point then effectively does become irrelevant, because people aren't shopping on price, they're shopping on quality and what can genuinely get me the best return.
Absolutely.
I love it. Thank you so much. Seriously, it's been amazing. I absolutely adore you, and I love the whole TLC model. So tell people, where can they find you if they are a talented lady who is looking to be surrounded by other talented women building their businesses around amazing families and children? Where can they come and seek out the help of Hannah Martin?
Well, we have a site, which is talentedladiesclub.com, and pretty much you can leapfrog from everything to there. So we have courses that we sell. There's navigation, there's our courses. You can find out how to work with me. You can find our social buttons on there, and there's lots of content. We have, I think, nearly 3,000 articles on there and interviews. So there's plenty of free content that you can look at as well.
I love it. And one of my personal favorites, if you are looking around the site, is I'm going to call it an expose on the affiliate marketing world. It's fantastically written and it's very funny.
The MLM stuff.
Yes. It did make me giggle. I remember reading it about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that you wrote it, and I think it was shared in a group that I saw, and I remember reading and thinking, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And the fact that so many companies had come out against it, and that you were like, no, this is just how it is. Your response was phenomenal. It was just brilliant.
It's all based on research and facts, and I'm really careful to look at their income disclosure report. So I base it all on facts. The fact that the companies themselves make public, they can't really argue with that.
So
try to, but they can't.
I just loved it. It just makes me laugh. Every so often I go back to it, I'm just like, when I have one of those days where I'm like, okay, great, what's this, what are we really talking about? I'm like, right, okay. So if you are a talented lady, you're looking to go and join a community with other women who are looking to succeed in their business around their families, make sure you head over to talentedladiesclub.com. Check out that MLM article. It is really funny if you do want a good giggle. And also the courses over there. If you end up joining the club, you might even see my face on a Discovery Call Masterclass on the inside. But thank you so much for coming on today. Genuinely, hugely appreciated, and a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I've loved it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, guys. That is it from me and Hannah. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you head over onto social and tell us what you thought. Tell us what your big takeaways were, and make sure that you tag us over on Instagram, because that is where all the cool kids are hanging out these days. Well, I've only just found it and that's where I'm going, so that's what we're going with. Have an epic weekend. I will see you on Monday for a new episode.